Chapter 4. There was no doubt about it. Anna's arrival had caused a fair degree of upheaval in the house, given me lots of problems to deal with, and caused a lot of heartache. From the very beginning, I had seen her as someone who was a little unusual. Perhaps it had been just the unusual way we'd met. The first few weeks had shown me that she was certainly no baby angel, no changeling, in fact, not even a sprite. No, she was at least 100% child, complete with the giggles, dirty face, and breathless wonder. She went flat out after each day, as busy as a bee, as inquisitive as a kitten, and as playful as a puppy. I suppose to some extent all children have a touch of magic about them, like some mysterious living lens. They seem to have the capacity to focus the light into the darkest and gloomiest of places, and this one had it in a very high degree. Perhaps it's the very newness of the young, or perhaps it's just because the shine hasn't worn off yet, but they can and do, if you give them half a chance, make a dent in the toughest armour of life. If you're very lucky, they can dissolve away all those protective barricades so carefully erected over years of living. Luckily, did I say? Well, if you can take it in your stride, being 16 years of age and naked, then you are lucky. If you can't, then it's hell. I've seen other people knocked right back on their heels at some of Anna's comments. It wasn't that her remarks were all that clever and penetrating. It was just that she made herself so vulnerable. This made people hesitate as to the next step. This was a trick that she had learned. Make people hesitate by whatever means you have at your disposal, fair or foul. And Anna was not above using tricks if they achieve their aim. Make people hesitate, and your remarks have a better chance of being looked at, being seen again. I suppose on the whole I didn't do too badly, considering. I didn't give in without a struggle. Letting your soul, or whatever fancy name you like to give it, out of its cage and into the daylight is perhaps the hardest thing anyone can do. The hoarding down the Broadway displayed in large red lettering, "Do you want to be saved?" I wondered just how many people would say yes to that. Had it read, "Do you want to be safe?" millions of people would have said yes, 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 we want to be safe. And another barricade could have gone up. The soul is imprisoned, protected. Nothing can get in to hurt it, but then it can't get out either. Being saved is nothing to do with being safe. Being saved is seeing yourself clearly. No bits of coloured glass, no protection, no hiding, simply seeing yourself. Anna never said anything about being saved, never, to my knowledge, attempted to save anybody. I don't suppose she would have understood this way of putting things, for this was my interpretation. But Anna knew full well that it was no use playing things safe. You simply had to come outside if you wanted to make progress. Coming outside was dangerous. Very dangerous, but it had to be done. There was no other way. It wasn't very long after Anna had come to live with us that I tried to tie a label on her. I suppose it was for my own satisfaction and comfort. But, thank God, she wouldn't be labelled. After the first few weeks of delicious enchantment with Anna, I found myself faced with two problems, one of which was fairly immediate and easy to understand. The other grew more slowly and was very difficult to understand. Neither of these problems was easily solved. In fact, it was over 2 years before I felt that I had the answers. The solution to both problems came at the same instant. My first problem was exactly what was my relationship with Anna. I suppose I was just about old enough to be her father, and for some time I wore that role without any great success. Perhaps the part of a big brother was a better bet, but that didn't fit either. I saw myself variously as father, brother, uncle, friend. Whatever I called myself seemed to leave an emptiness which needed to be filled. Nothing happened for a long time. The other problem was, what exactly was Anna? A child, certainly, a very intelligent and a very gifted child. But what was she? Everybody who came into contact with Anna recognized in her some strangeness, something that marked her as different from other children. "She's fey," said Milly. "She's got the eye," said Mum. "She's a bloody genius," said Danny. The Reverend Castle said, "She's a very precocious little girl." This certain strangeness in Anna gave some people an uneasy feeling, but her innocence and sweetness acted like a balm, soothing away suspicions and fears. Had Anna been a mathematical genius, all would have been well. She would have been written off as a freak. Had she been a musical prodigy, we could have all have cooed with delight. But she was neither of these things. Anna's strangeness lay in the fact that her statements were so often right, and as time went on, they became more and more often right. One of our neighbours was quite convinced that Anna could see into the future. But then Mrs. W. was a bit like that. Mrs. W. lived in a world of tarot cards, tea leaves and premonitions. The fact, however, remained that Anna was so often right in her predictions that she appeared to be some sort of diminutive prophet or East End oracle. Certainly Anna had a gift, but it turned out to be nothing spooky, nothing out of this world. In a very deep sense, it was at once as mysterious as it was simple. She had an immediate grasp of pattern, of structure, of the way that bits and pieces were organised into a whole. Unexplainable as this gift might be, it was always well and truly earthed in the nature of things. As simple and as mysterious as a spider's web, as ordinary as a spiral seashell. Anna could see pattern where others just saw muddles, and this was Anna's gift. The day that horse and cart got its back wheel stuck in the tram lines produced 6 willing helpers. "All together, lads! When I say heave, all together heave. Ready? Heave!" We all heaved like mad. Nothing happened. "Once again, lads, heave!" We all heaved once again. Same result. Nothing. After a few minutes of heaving and cussing, Anna tugged at my coat. "Finn, if you put something across the line under the wheel and something so it won't go back again, and then push, it's easier, and the horse can help." With the help of a flat iron bar and a few bits of timber, we pushed and the horse pulled. The wheel came out as sweetly and as easily as a cork coming out of a bottle. Someone thumped me on the back. "Good lad, that was a good idea of yourn." How could I say that it was my idea? How could I say it was hers? I just accepted the praise. Yes, it was true. Anna certainly had a lot of luck. Such moments as these gave me great pleasure and pride in her achievements. But there were also moments of great anguish when she seemed to overstep the mark. Moments when her remarks, her statements, her claims seemed to me to be so rash, so wildly out, that I felt compelled to say something. She took it all without comment. I felt like a heel, and I didn't get it right for a long time. Now, Anna accepted the concept of atoms as easily as a canary bird accepts birdseed. She accepted the size of the universe and its billions of stars without batting an eyelid. Eddington's estimate of the number of electrons in the universe was admittedly a fairly large number, but nevertheless very manageable. It wasn't very hard to write down a number bigger than that, and Anna knew full well that numbers have the capacity for going on and on and on. Anna soon ran out of words to express very large numbers, and this was becoming more and more important. The word million was adequate for most things. Billion came in handy on occasions. But if you wanted to use a word for a very, very large number, well, you'd just have to invent one. Anna invented one. A squillion. A squillion was a very elastic sort of word. You could stretch it as far as you liked. Anna was beginning to have a need for such a word. One evening we were sitting on the railway wall, just watching the trains go by and waving to anyone who would wave back. Anna was drinking her fizzy lemonade when she started to giggle. It's difficult to describe the next few minutes. If you want some kind of a picture, I suggest you try to drink fizzy lemonade, giggle, and develop the hiccups. I waited until the giggles had died down, until the hiccups had stopped. Waited until the toss of the head had settled her hair back into place. "Well," I said, "what's so funny, Titch?" "Well, I just thought I could answer a squillion questions." "Me too," I replied without any surprise. "Can you do it too?" She leaned forward with excitement. "Sure, nothing to it. But mind you, I might get about half a squillion wrong." I'd taken careful aim with this remark, but it fell wide of the mark. Oh, the disappointment was obvious. I get all my answers right. This, I thought, is the time for a bit of the old guiding hand stuff. A bit of correction wouldn't come amiss. You can't. Nobody can answer a squillion questions right. I can. I can answer a squillion questions right. That's just not possible. Nobody can do that. I can. I really can. I took a deep breath and turned her to face me, quite ready to scold her. I was met by a pair of eyes, calm and certain. It was obvious that she had thought she was correct. "I can teach you," she continued. Before I had a chance to utter another word, she was off. "What's 1 add 1 add 1? 3, of course. What's 1 add 2? 3. What's 8 take away 5? Still 3. I wondered just where this was getting me. What's 8 take away 6 add 1? 3. What's 100 and 3 take away 100? Hold on, Titch. Of course that answers 3, but you're cheating a bit, aren't you? No, I'm not. It looks like it to me. You're just making these questions up as you go along. Yes, I know. Why, you could go on asking questions of that kind until the cows come home." Her grin exploded into a roar of laughter, and I wondered what I'd said that was so funny. It was the tilt of her head and the grin that made me realise what I'd said. If asking questions till the cows came home wasn't the same as a squillion questions, then what was it? Just in case the lesson hadn't been rammed home far enough, she then turned the thumbscrew one last turn with, "What's a half and a half and a half and a—" I put my hand over her mouth. I'd got the message. I didn't give the answer I was supposed to. With the ease and matter-of-factness that a mother shows when patting a baby's burps, she finished off with, "And how many questions, sums, is 3 the answer to?" Dutifully chastised, I answered, a little uncertain as to what garden path I'd been led up. "Squillions," I said. By this time I had looked away and was busy waving to the passing train as if nothing had happened. After a moment or two, she put her head on my shoulder and said, "Ain't it funny, Finn? Every number is the answer to squillions of questions." I suppose it was at that point that my education began in earnest. For quite some time I just didn't know which way was up or down, or whether I was coming or going. I had been taught the good old-fashioned method of question first, answer second. Now I was being taught by a half-pint red-headed demon that almost every sentence, grunt, number or utterance was the answer to an unuttered question. I suppose it is possible to fault this method of approach, but now I'm stuck with it, and it's very usable. Very gently, but with great excitement, I was instructed in the method of walking backwards. Keeping my eyes firmly fixed on the answer, I was encouraged to walk backwards until at last I bumped into the question. Patiently it was pointed out to me that the answer 3 was very important and useful because it led back to squillions of questions. The more questions an answer led back to, the more useful was the answer. The interesting thing about this method, I was told, was that some answers led back to very few questions, and some answers led back to only one question. The fewer questions an answer led back to, the more deeply important were those questions. When an answer led back to only one question, then you'd hit the jackpot. As I was slowly initiated into this upside-down world, I found myself positively enjoying the kind of answers that led back to squillions of questions. That the number 9 stood out as the answer to squillions of unasked questions, I found myself getting more and more excited about. I too could answer squillions of questions correctly. At this aspect of the upside-down world, I'd found myself somewhere near the top of the class, constructing questions of such complexity that I would have hesitated to try to solve them had I not known the answer from the beginning. At the other end of the scale, the end where the answer led back to the only question, I was at the bottom of the class, uncertain, hesitant, and most unwilling to state the question. Taking a stroll one evening with me and playing an unending solo game of hopscotch on the paving stones, Anna suddenly flung over her shoulder, without stopping her game, "Finn," she says, "in my middle." As a very obedient pupil, I chanted, "In my middle." From 10 yards ahead, she yelled, "What?" I stopped, dead in my tracks, filled my lungs with the necessary, and yelled, In my middle! Little old ladies with their shopping baskets hurriedly crossed over the road with sidelong glances at me. Young girls giggled, and children made those sorts of signs that indicated that I had a screw loose somewhere. Whatever activities or thoughts these good people had been engaged in were rudely interrupted by a 6-foot-plus, 15-stone young man suddenly standing still and yelling fit to wake the dead, "In my middle!" Sympathetic looks and such remarks as, "He must be bonkers, you can never tell by looks, can you?" were aimed in my direction. How could they possibly have known that I was conversing with that leaping, prancing demon red-headed kid now some 30 or 40 yards away? Obviously, the man was having some kind of seizure. At all these reactions to my yell, my mouth fell open and I gaped like a stranded goldfish. My eyes stood out on stalks. I must have indeed looked bonkers. With a flood of embarrassment, I rapidly pulled up my anchors, slammed my legs into top gear, and fled down a side street, around the block, and braked hard in front of Anna, who was still spring-heeling it on the spot. "Oi!" I panted. "You with me?" My mentor, or was she my tormentor? Still continued with her demented yo-yo act. I put both hands on her head and pressed her to a stop with, "Hold it. Your engine's still running. Cease. You'll curdle your brains." She ceased and said, "What's the big question, Finn?" "How the heck do I know?" I answered, looking back down the street, half expecting to see a white-coated men bearing down on me with a straitjacket. "You're frightened." She took my hand and we went on our way. It wasn't an accusation, just a matter-of-fact observation. We came to the canal bridge and Anna said, "Let's go down the cut." I picked her up and leaned over the bridge, holding her at arm's length, and dropped her the 5 feet or so onto the towpath. This was our usual method of getting down to the cut. We never, ever used the stairs, which are only about 20 feet away. We mooched along down the towpath, said "How do" to a couple of horses, plopped a few stones into the canal, and sunk a baked bean tin. We searched for a handful of skimming stones and skimmed for about half an hour. Managed to bounce a few stones on the opposite towpath with one bounce, and then pressed on down the path. We came to a moored barge and clambered on board and sat up at the front end with our legs dangling over the side. I rescued a fag from my coat pocket and straightened out the kinks, searching for and found a match. Anna lifted her foot up and I scraped the match alight on the sole of a shoe. I lit the fag and took a long drag. We lay there side by side on the barge, soaking up as many ultraviolet rays as managed to stagger through the steam smoke of the surrounding factories. I was dreaming of my nice white yacht sailing through the Mediterranean, the steward bringing me cool pints of bitter and lighting my specially made monogrammed cigarettes. The sun was shining in a clear blue sky, and the fragrance of exotic flowers wafted across the waters. Beside me lay this enchanting child, happy and contented, radiating sweetness as innocent as a summer's morning. Little did I know that this miniature angel was busy stoking up her question and answers boiler, waiting for a good head of steam. Little did I know that she was busy sharpening up her scalpels, saw, and cold chisels, waiting the half of her sledgehammers. Halfway through my second glass of beautiful bitter cold shandy, my white yacht struck a mine and sank instantly. My comfortable couch was now the metal deck of a barge, my pillow a coil of tarred rope, My monogram cigarettes was a dead and drooping fag, and the sweet smell of flowers wafting across the mead was the soap factory working overtime. The golden summer sun in the clear blue sky was peering watery-eyed through the sulphurous clouds of the chimney stacks. You empty in your middle? I closed my eyes tightly, hoping that another yock would pick me up. Already it was beginning to take shape. I could see the new placards. Dramatic sea rescue. Young man rescued after 21 days at sea. Exclusive story. I was beginning to like this. I fitted the part well. Oi! My right ear exploded, and all my dreams fled out of my left ear. A good, hard prod with an elbow, and an empty brain box filled up with reality again. What? What's up? I said, prising myself up onto an elbow. You empty in your middle? I didn't know if that was a question or a statement. Of course I'm not empty in my middle. What's the question, then? I thought that I knew what she wanted me to say, but I wasn't going to say it. She could stew. I chewed it over for a few moments and framed the question. Where is Anna? On second thoughts, I decided that this particular question was a bit too dangerous, so I said, Where is Millie? She grinned at me, and I felt that at any moment she would pat me on the head and pop a sweetie in my mouth for being a good little pupil that I was. And what's the question to the answer in Mill's middle? Ha! I'd already worked that one out. A 24-carat foolproof question stopper. A real doozy, one that she hadn't bargained on, one that she couldn't wriggle out of. With great care and deliberation, I replied, The answer in Millie's middle leads back to the question, where is sex? And added to myself, and now, you little perisher, get out of that one. She didn't have to get out of it. She never got into it. Without the flicker of an eyelid, without the catch of a breath, she pressed on. Her questions and proddings were like the waves breaking on a seashore. As one rolled up the sandy shore, so millions of others were behind, formed far out at sea. They were rolling in relentlessly, and nothing could stop them. So it was with Anna's questions and proddings. In the depths of her, questions were being formulated, boiling up to spill out of her mouth, out of her eyes, out of her every action. Nothing could stop them. Nothing. It was as if every occasion inside her was destined to meet its companion occasion outside her. She started to say, What is the question to the answer in the middle of sex? I reached out my hand and silenced her question with a finger on her lips. The question is, I said, Where is Mr. God? She bit my finger hard and looked at me. Her eyes said, That's for keeping me waiting. Her lips said, Yes. I lay back again on the deck of the barge and thought about what I'd said. The more I thought about it, the more I did come to the conclusion that it really wasn't bad after all. In fact, it was pretty good. I liked it. At least it prevented all the fuss and bother of pointing up there and saying, That's where God is, or pointing out among the stars and saying, That God is there. Yes, indeed, I liked it very much. The only didn't get resolved for quite a few days. Even then, teacher had to lead me gently by the hand and explain in words that this idiot could understand. You see, I had got to the point where I could, without any undue hesitation, give the question to the answer. In the worm's middle, in my middle, in your middle. I'd even stopped getting het up about the question to the answer in the tramcar's middle. The question was, where is Mr. God? So far so good. Everything in the garden was lovely, except perhaps for one tiny, irrelevant and unimportant fact. I was ringed about with an unclimbable, impenetrable, couldn't see the top of the range of mountains. The names of these towering peaks were the worms in the ground, I'm here, you're there, the tramcars moving down the street. I had got stuck with all these multitudinous and varied things which had not got middles in which Mr. God was. The whole universe, it seemed, was strewn and littered about with sundry theirs and various heres. Instead of some whole and big Mr. God sitting around in heaven of umpteen dimensions, I was now faced with a vast assortment of little Mr. Gods, inhabiting the middles of everything. Perhaps all these middles contained bits of Mr. God, which had been put together like some kind of gigantic jigsaw puzzle. After it had all been explained to me, my first thought was, poor old Mohammed. He had to go to the mountains. But not Anna. She neither went to the mountains, nor did she fetch the mountains to her. She merely said, scat, and they scattered. Mind you, although I knew by now that the mountains were not really there, and that I could have moved freely and unhampered, there are occasions, not many I'm glad to say, when I get the distant feeling that I've been brought up pretty sharpish-like, and by a clunk on the head. It certainly feels as if I've walked into a mountain, even though I couldn't see it. Perhaps one day I shall be able to walk freely about without ducking occasionally. As for my problem about the hers and the theirs, the explanation went like this. Where are you? She had said. Here, of course, I replied. Where's me, then? There. Where do you know about me? Inside myself somewhere. Then you know my middle in your middle. Yeah, I suppose I do. Then you know Mr. God in my middle and your middle, and everything you know, every person you know in your middle. Every person and everything that you know has got Mr. God in their middle, and so you've got their Mr. God in your middle too. It's easy. When Mr. William of Ockham said, it is vain to do with more what can be done with less, he had invented his famous razor, but it was Anna who had sharpened it.
Trying to keep up with Anna and her ideas could be a very exhausting business, particularly because I had finished with my schooling, or so I thought. Here was I, all nicely stacked up with ideas of what was what, and I was being made to unstack them again, and sometimes it wasn't all that easy to do. Like the time I was introduced to the idea of sex. One of the great advantages of living in the East End was sex. In those days it was spelt with a small s and not with a big S. By advantage, I mean that nobody spent half their life wondering if they were born in a beehive or a bird's nest. The whole of the birds and the bee saga was out, but defiantly. Nobody was in any doubt as to their origins. One might have been conceived under a gooseberry bush, but born, never. Most of the kids were familiar with the good old-fashioned four-letter Anglo-Saxon words before they could count even to 4, or knew what the letter was. Those were the days when the said Anglo-Saxon words were used as nouns and verbs, and not as adjectives. When sex, with a little s, was as natural in its right place as the air we breathe. It hadn't got the self-importance of a capital S, nor for that matter its problems. Perhaps it was because we learnt about it so early on in our lives that it rarely got snagged up. Perhaps it's only when you learn about it late in life that you begin to spell it with that capital S. This is nothing to do with sex with a small s or a capital S. It's to do with Anna's discovery of sex, the kind that you spell with all capitals. It wasn't that there was anything wrong with the ordinary run-of-the-mill sex stuff. It was all perfectly understandable. After all, babies were babies. What else could you call them? Kittens are babies, lambs are babies. And what about baby cabbages? One thing they all seemed to have in common was the fact that they were new, brand new. They were, as Anna said, borned. Or, in other words, had been brought forth. If this were true, and it certainly appeared to be true, then what about ideas? What about stars? What about mountains and such like? You couldn't argue with the statement that words brought forth new ideas. Could it be that words were something to do with sex? I don't know how long Anna had been mulling over this problem. It may have been for months. One thing was certain. She hadn't sorted anything out yet. Otherwise, I would have had the full blast of her discoveries. It was a happy coincidence that I happened to be around when she made her breakthrough. It happened one Sunday afternoon after a not very successful Sunday school meeting. Danny and I were holding up the lamp-post chatting to Millie. The street was full of kids playing Hi Jimmy... The street was full of kids playing Hi Jimmy Nacko. The street was full of kids playing Hi Jimmy Nacko and skipping games, and 4 or 5 of the little ones were playing with a yellow balloon. The balloon game didn't last very long. The balloon game did not last very long, as the balloon is not made to withstand the combined weight of 5 kids lying on it. It burst. Millie charged off to mop up the tears and to give general comfort to one and all. Danny was roped in to be the cushion for the next team to be downsy in the Hi Jimmy... Danny was roped in to be the cushion for the next team to be downsy in the Hi Jimmy Nacko game. Anna had stopped the never-ending chant of the ball-bouncing game and had picked up her burst balloon. Anna had stopped the never-ending chant of the ball-bouncing game and had picked up the burst balloon. She drifted over towards me and sat on the curb by the lamp-post. In a kind of reverie, she was pulling the remains of the balloon into various shapes. Suddenly, I heard it. It was the sound of Anna's tongue slapping against the back of her teeth. It was a sign that her thinking apparatus was working overtime. I looked down. Anna had got one end of the burst balloon trapped by her foot to the pavement. While she was stretching it with one hand, she was poking it with her right index finger. "That's funny," she murmured. Her unblinking eyes solidified this experiment like some 20th century Medusa. "Finn? What's up? Will you pull this for me?" I got down beside her and was handed the burst balloon. "Now pull it for me." I stretched the balloon for her and she stuck her finger into it. "That's funny." "What's funny?" I asked. "What's it look like?" "Looks like your finger sticking through a burst balloon." "Don't it look like a man's bit?" "I suppose it does, kind of." "Looks like a lady's on the other side," she said. "Oh, does it? Let's have a look." I looked. It kind of did in a way. That's funny, isn't it? Well, what's so funny about it? If I only do one thing, she poked a finger into the balloon again, it makes ladies and a man's. Don't you think that's funny, Finn, eh? Yeah. 2 for the price of 1. That's funny. She went off to play with the other kids. It must have been about 3 o'clock in the morning when she stood beside me bed. Finn, you awake? No. Good. I thought you were asleep. Can I come? If you want to. She slid into bed. Finn, is church sex? I was awake, very much so. What do you mean, is church sex? It puts seeds into your heart and it makes new things come. Oh. That's why it's Mr. God and not Mrs. God. Oh, is it? It might be, she went on. I think lessons is sex too. You better not tell Miss Haynes that. Why not? Lessons put things into your head and some new things come. That's not sex, that's learning. Sex is for making babies. Not always it ain't. How do you make that out? Well, if it's on one side it's a man and if it's on the other side a lady, one side of what, I asked. I don't know yet. She paused for a few moments. Am I a lady? Almost, I reckon. I can't have babies though, can I? Well, not quite yet. But I can have new ideas, can't I? Sure you can. So it's like having a baby. A bit, ain't it? Oh, could be. The conversation stopped at this point, and I lay awake for about 30 minutes or so, and then I must have fallen asleep. Suddenly, I was being shaken by Anna, and she was asking me, Asleep, Finn? Not now. No, I'm not. If it's coming out, it's a lady, and if it's going in, it's a man. It is? What is? Anything. Oh, that's nice. Yes, ain't it exciting? Oh, breathtaking. So you can be a man and a lady at the same time. I got the idea that she was trying to put over. All the universe has got a sex-like quality about it. It is seminal and productive at the same time. The seeds of words produce ideas. The seeds of ideas produce goodness knows what. The whole blessed thing is male and female at one and the same time. In fact, the whole thing is pure sex. We've taken one aspect of it and call it sex with a small s, or made it self-conscious and called it sex with a big S. But that was our own fault, wasn't it?